Hey there, I'm Sierra Bailey with Doers Shakers Makers, and I'm here for this week's Tuesday tip. Why should you care about profit margins as a talented tiny business owner? Well, besides being able to tell you the health of your business, profit margins can be an incredibly helpful tool to talented tiny business owners. What you need to understand about profit margins is, yes, math is involved. It is an equation, and I will let you Google profit margins or listen to the Doers Shakers Makers podcast to go into what that equation is. It basically is letting you know the percentage of every dollar that you are earning, that you are selling your product, selling your service, bringing into your business. What percentage is your profit? This is really helpful for a lot of tiny businesses because many of us start out either having left a corporate job or knowing that we have to bring in a specific amount of money. So if you are starting your business and you are out there selling a product that you are only going to be keeping 14% out of every dollar, so 14 cents on the dollar, you need to know that number. Or at the end of the year, after you realize all of the expenses that you've spent, you'll realize this before the end of the year, the taxes that have been coming out and what the reality of overhead is, you will realize that you didn't make your mark, that you were whatever the opposite of 86% off of that goal, because the reality is knowing your profit margins lets you know how much money you are actually making. All right, you can go find out about that calculating equation that you can put together. Also keep an eye on gross margin, especially if you are handmade and making your own products. But I want to tell you now some ways that you can increase your profit margins. Every industry, and even besides industry, things like your geographic location, things like how big your business is, all different factors can go into what makes a good profit margin. But we can think about across all industries, 10% can be standard, 20% is typically good across a lot, and 5% would be bad. But they still range. It ranges from like an 8 or 9% in restaurants up to like 26% in financial planning. And most of the research that I've done on this, if you look at bar graphs of it, that is typically the range. It's about, a 6% would be the very lowest, which in some industries is what you're going to aim for, all the way up to, I think about 26, 27% was the highest of your net profit margin. Your gross, meaning how much you are making on each product, would be a significantly higher number. But again, you can Google that for more information. My point right now is to let you know why, as a talented tiny business owner, you should be aware of your profit margins and a few ways that you can improve them so that you are actually profiting at a higher percentage of every dollar. First thing that you can do, and if you see me glancing over, I do have some notes on this to keep me on track, is to decrease your expenses and cut costs. I mentioned overhead. Overhead includes everything from rent to utilities to all things like that. So is it possible to cut your overhead? Can you not have such an expensive office or retail space or something? That's something to consider. Some industries, again, like restaurants, you have to have a restaurant to sell your food. So it depends on that industry. And that is why financial planning can be so high, because one does not necessarily need to have an office or a space. So they're cutting overhead right there. Other factors, of course, play into this, not cut and dry. So the second way to increase your profit margins is to cut underperforming products and services, especially with low gross margins. So sometimes, especially when you are handmade, sometimes something sells so well and it's a little more expensive to produce, to buy wholesale, to pay for manufacturing, whatever. Sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's not at all. So it is great to know your gross margins, to be able to go through your products and see not only what's not performing, but what is just too expensive to make it worth it. The third way to increase your profit margins is to increase your product offerings and services. So you could create the actual amount of products and services you offer, and you can sell more to your existing customers. So try to encourage a higher value per order or per transaction. So that could mean that you are upselling, adding new services onto something they're already purchasing, encouraging them to bundle their services or their products when they're purchasing, trying to get them to have a bigger checkout per transaction. And on the other side of that is to sell to new customers, either expand the actual customer base that you have or perhaps reach a new customer base. And the last is to increase your prices, especially if you are a service provider. When was the last time that you increased your services? Of course, what the market will bear comes into this. But if it has been a couple of years since you have last increased your services, well, due to inflation, you want to make sure that you are checking in with that every so often and making sure that you're still staying competitive and that you are making your prices reflect what they should be of the increase of your work and your experience and everything that you've been learning. If it is a product, you usually can every year get those up a little bit without it being a big deal. If you are selling products that are averaging $100, even just a 5% increase could end up having a really big impact on your gross margin of your products and your net profit margin. I hope this helped you understand a little bit how profit margins can be very helpful as a tool in your talented tiny business owning toolbox. If you have any questions, as always, please reach out to me, Sierra Bailey, with Doers Shakers Makers. It has been a delight to come to you this week with your Tuesday tip, and I will see you next week. Thank you.